What is the scariest story, that is 1000% true? Probably the Pariah diving incident, where 5 divers were sucked into an underground oil pipeline while working on repairs. Just learned about this, and the wiki article is crazy. Pariah admitted they had no rescue plan, citing that they had no legal responsibility to rescue the men. WTF. The lake that killed an entire village when it basically burped. The Lake Nyos disaster. A crater lake in Cameroon caused the deaths of around 1,700 people and 3,500 livestock in 1986 due to a limnic eruption. The lake suddenly released a large cloud of carbon dioxide, suffocating nearby villages and livestock. This lake has a system now that essentially burps, so hopefully this won't happen again. Luis Garavito. He is by far the worst serial killer / pedophile I have ever heard of. He was active in Colombia in the 90s, and he would lure homeless young boys into the jungle, where he would offer them things like food, money, or jobs, and he would make the walk for many miles so they'd be too tired to fight back or escape. Afterwards, he would savagely rape and torture the boys. I don't even want to get into detail about what he did, trust me. It's worse than what you think. He was even convicted of 189 murders, but it's believed he may have murdered as many as 300 to 400 boys. There's even been mass graves found, containing his victims' remains with dozens of them. Luis's crimes were so prolific and brutal, the police even thought it was the work of a cartel, a militant group, since this was during Colombia's civil war, or even a satanic cult, because they couldn't fathom one man could have killed that many or been that brutal. What's even more shocking is Luis only sentenced to about 20 years in prison, because Colombia doesn't have life imprisonment or the death sentence. But just before he got parole, he died from cancer. Luis was so prolific that wherever he lived, local reports of child molestation increased substantially. A local story that haunts me is the murder of a former coworker, Sean Dugas. He had a Magic the Gathering card collection worth 6 figures, including a Black Lotus, IIRC, that was incredibly rare at the time. He befriended these 2 brothers who eventually chased him around his house and bludgeoned him to death with a hammer before stuffing his body into a plastic bin and filling it with concrete. It's so disturbing to me because Sean was such a chill, hippie dude who got a talking to for wearing JNCOs to interviews. He was a gifted reporter and had a hand in starting a homeless encampment that served hundreds for years after his death. He was a wacky and kind dude, and the thought of the terror he went through in his final moments frightens me more than any horror movie I've ever seen. Damn, this hurt to read. Rip Sean, I bet you were a fucking great dude. One day, I was at my temp job when an announcement came over the PA system that everybody was to stay in their office, lock the door, and not come out under any circumstances until they were told to. Having absolutely no idea what was going on, I locked the door of my office, jammed a chair under the doorknob, sat on the floor in the knee hole of my desk, and read the book I brought to read at lunch. About an hour later, they gave the all clear, and I went back to whatever task I'd been doing beforehand. We later found out that a disgruntled former employee had showed up with a Thompson submachine gun and started shooting people. Just recently, hundreds of women were raped and burned alive during the chaos as a Rwandan-backed rebel, M23, took control of Congolese city of Goma. The female inmates were attacked in their wing inside Goma's Munzenzi prison. Several thousand men stormed the female wing, raped, decapitated, and then set the female prison on fire, with hundreds of women still alive inside. Mind you, there were babies and children in there with their moms. Some sources say there only were 9 to 13 survivors of the female prison. Other sources say there were no survivors of the massacre. We speak of the terrors of Rwanda, but it is happening under our noses again, this time in the DRC. There are so many other atrocities happening there right now. This is just one example. To make it even worse, practically no one is talking about it, other than the obligatory news article that gets swallowed amidst hundreds of other articles about the Kardashians or something else. Over the hill from where I was raised, in the 1930s, there was a family with a son who had serious mental problems. It had gotten bad enough they were going to put him in a home. The father took the rest of the family to town, while mom stayed with the boy. When the family returned, they found the boy walking around the house with his mom's head on a broomstick. Now that is fucking scary. This happened in a small rural community not far from the capital city of our state. Think under an hour to the city, 15 to 20 minutes from suburbia. Many years ago, a man decided that his wife was cheating on him, so he killed her. Then he proceeded to kill his 7 children, along with his sister-in-law and her baby, who were visiting. Was due to be hanged, but the death penalty was then banned. Wound up spending only 7 years in jail. Upon release, he moved states and changed his name. Then married a woman with 7 children and lived his life happily. They had no idea until after he died. ETA, you can Google the Hope Forest Massacre for more details. How did he get only 7 years in jail? That's not even 1 year per person murdered. How horrible. The DuPont factory and their Teflon story. Literally, one company poisoning the entire planet and getting away with it. Sounds so ridiculously fictional, but it absolutely happened, and every living being on the planet still suffers its consequences. DuPont by Jesse Wells. Send out all your checks. You can't take back birth defects, DuPont. On September 11th, people trapped in the upper floors who decided to jump because the alternative was even worse. I read an account from a first responder firefighter once. He was riding in the back of a fire truck. It was an extremely bumpy ride. The head driver said over the intercom, "We are driving over some debris. Exit the truck on your left. Don't look behind you." Of course, he looked behind himself and saw the debris they were driving over was the bodies of jumpers. Jimmy Savile and the countless lives he destroyed because of his depravity. My auntie's little sister was permanently disabled due to meningitis giving her brain damage as a child. She was often in and out of hospitals for the disabled. When Jimmy would visit, several nurses told her parents, "Don't leave her alone with him." They knew. Everyone knew. That just makes it that more fucked up. The kidnapping, torture, and murder of Junko Furuta. Edit. To all those saying I should have put a warning, you're in a thread asking about the scariest thing that's 1000% true, and it's clearly labeled as a murder. What do you expect, sunshine and rainbows? Here's your warning. It's a Japanese teen girl who was kidnapped, then brutally beaten, mercilessly tortured, and repeatedly sexually assaulted for 44 days until she eventually died from the abuse. This haunts me. I read about this when I was far too young, and it has stayed with me for years. I cannot believe the perpetrators weren't punished severely. They abused and degraded her ways I couldn't even fathom. Most of the scariest ones have been mentioned already, so I'll add one. S21 prison in Cambodia during the Khmer Rouge regime. It was in a repurposed high school. Existed for 4 years, had around 20,000 prisoners in those 4 years, out of which only 12 are known to have survived. There are records of over 150 people being released, however, they were likely recaptured and executed. The building is still there. You can visit it as a museum. That pedophiles are shockingly common, many go their whole lives without being caught, or until they are well into old age. I worked my whole life in government. Politicians truly are corrupt, and we might as well get used to it, because we're not going to change it. It's not a conspiracy theory, it's absolutely true. Vote for the lesser of two evils and move on. Don't be disappointed when they don't deliver, because half the things they promised are not even feasible. I would see local politicians promise things that I knew they couldn't financially deliver. There was no way. The public still buys into it. They don't know any better. Example: the president does not have much control over gas prices. Get that out of your head. I know there's a lot of extreme stuff in the comments, but to me, the scariest thing is knowing one day I won't have my mom anymore. This haunts me because I can see how easily it happened. In 1995, in the UK, a man was driving a low loader truck with a mechanical digger on the back. He didn't realize that the arm of the digger wasn't properly secured. As he drove down the twisty roads in Cornwall, the arm would swing out into oncoming traffic. The bucket of the digger ripped the roof from several cars, decapitating the drivers. 5 people died. I don't know if that was 5 separate cars. And I think 2 were injured. The truck driver was completely unaware of the devastation he was leaving in his wake. I think of him sometimes. How awful it must be to know you were unintentionally responsible for 5 deaths. He ended up in a psychiatric hospital with PTSD, and many first responders also needed PTSD treatment. Horrifying. Heard one scarier and 1000% true? Drop it in the comments.